Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. Today we have yet another Sony ICX-493-AQA. Rolls right off the tongue. Now, if you don't remember this random set of numbers, that's fine. It's a sensor that appears on several cameras from the mid-2000s. Your Nikon D80, D40X, Sony A100, and this Pentax K10D right here. Now, I'm sure there are other cameras that use this same sensor. Feel free to drop a comment with which ones they are below if you happen to know. I don't remember what any of them are off the top of my head at the moment. Anyways, we'll kick this off with how I got this Pentax. I was not actually looking for another CCD camera, but a deal popped up. A good deal. It was this, the K10D with the 70mm F2.4 DA Limited and the 50mm 1.4 SMC-FA for 100 Canadian dollar dues. That's like 3 US cents or something. I couldn't say no to that. So, you know, here we are. I have a K10D. With that, let's get into it. What is the K10D? Well, the Pentax K10D is a prosumer APS-C DSLR with a CCD sensor, if you couldn't figure that out already. It features the KAF2 mount, and this camera was announced on the 14th of September 2006. Again, the sensor is the 10 megapixel Sony ICX-493-AQA. The one that we all know and love. It has an ISO range of 100 to 1600, and fun fact about the K10D, this camera was technically also sold and branded as the Samsung GX10. Now, the K10D, it's a weather-sealed camera. It features sensor stabilization and sensor dust shake. Excellent modern features that you'd find on many cameras right now. Now, this camera has an AF module that is a 11-point system, 9 of which are cross types. The metering is done via 16-segment sensor, and the shutter is from 30 seconds to 1/4000th of a second, and it's capable of shooting at a whole 3 FPS for 9 RAWs. The rear of the display is a 2.5-inch LCD featuring 210 K dots. Now, with a battery, this camera comes in at a 793 grams, not bad, about 0.79 plena. Storage media for this particular camera is a SD card, and when this camera was new, came in at $899.99 USD, or roughly $1,400 in sad modern dollars, or roughly 1,890 sad poutine maple bucks. For a full spec breakdown, I'm going to put a link to Rico's website down below. Shooting with the K10D, operation and feel. Initially I thought, okay, this is just another camera with that same Sony sensor that I've seen kind of a lot now. But when I got to actually using this thing, I realized that this design, it's actually one of my favorites. Not as good as the Nikon D200, nothing ever will be, but better than, say, the Sony A200 or A100. At least for me. Anyways, the grip on this camera, it is well sized, good for my hands at least, and provides a deep and comfortable hold. The latched SD card slot, which you'll notice right here, is a nice touch, and it kind of just elevates the feel of the camera, that you just have a nice flippy latchy thing to pop a door open. Maybe it's just me though, but it reminded me of cameras that are like, the 1D or Nikon Pro body setups. It's just kind of nice. When it comes to control layout, it's got 2 command dials, one here and one by your thumb, which is great to see. They have a good tactile feel and nice clickety-clickities. Now, the button layout on this camera in general is pretty sublime. All the things you want on the right side of the camera are there. You got your, exposure comp, you got your exposure lock, and you can pull up a quick menu with your FN button to get a bunch of quick things that you might want to change on that D-pad. All the controls that you don't really need to do at eye level make sense, such as the menu button right there and your metering mode select, which is on that top mode dial, well, underneath the mode dial with the lever. Let's see if I can activate. Whoa. Man, it is a stiffer. Oh, I'm rotating it the wrong way. But there you go. Meter select, relatively quick, but on the opposite side, done with your left hand. Now, the only thing I don't really like about this camera is the dedicated RAW, JPEG, toggle. I know some people did mention that they do on the fly use this, so it's, I guess, a pretty useful button for some, but me, I am a RAW only kind of shooter, always have, always will be, unless something drastically changes. So I find this to be just a bit of a waste of space. On the bottom of the camera, you'll also notice that you have something kind of interesting, a dedicated switch for your sensor shake, and it seems kind of weird, and initially I was kind of annoyed that they bothered doing that, since, why would you ever turn it off? But I do remember, at least in the older days of image stabilization, that sometimes during longer exposures, the image stabilization might not necessarily be a good function. It might actually make your long exposures not super sharp, / things might jitter a bit. So it's helpful just to be able to turn it off quickly. And then I kind of thought, it's a fine switch. Now, one nice thing that this camera does have that they don't necessarily expect in the mid-2000s, although it was a feature coming in, was the auto ISO. I do like it. I do like the way that it is employed. It's not as polished as, more modern cameras, but it is there. Shooting with the K10D, image quality and autofocus. When this camera hits, it hits real hard. The image sharpness is very solid, on a per pixel level. And even though the sensor does have an AA filter, it, doesn't seem to be as harsh as some other cameras. I haven't compared a lot of these cameras side by side directly, but from just looking at the images that I've edited recently, it does seem like these have a nice bit of sharpness to them. Might also be a combination of the optics on the system as well, but I like to think that most of my lenses are reasonably sharp because I do tend to stop down when I use them if I need to anyways. So it just seems that the K10D is putting out some nice punchy sharpness there. Now, the colors that the camera also produces, the ones that are baked into the RAWs, also seem fairly nice and have a good saturation. White balance looks like it is reasonably spot on, at least on my copy of the camera. And overall, the lenses for Pentax mount, they're quite nice. The Pentax line of crop sensor lenses generally are fairly well optimized and perform quite well on the system. Again, I have nothing but good things to say with regard to this 70mm f2.4 that's on there right now. It's the lens that I generally always shoot with, but we'll see. I got some more Pentax glass that I'm going to be looking at. Now, when it comes to ISO performance, it's pretty similar to other cameras featuring this sensor, although Pentax's own baking in of the files can be seen. At high ISOs, the K10D does a pretty good job of retaining detail, even though color noise is kind of higher than other cameras using the same sensor. Overall, I find this to be a pretty good trade-off, since with modern software and modern noise reduction, you can mostly address the color noise in post. Now, that said, if you want to keep the camera in the gravy zone, probably looking at having the ISO set between 100 and 400, where, you'll still have some reasonable ISO range, but you'll have also more flexibility to play with the file. You'll be able to pull things and push things a little bit better than if you're using those higher ISO ranges. Now, the dynamic range is not up to par with modern CMOS sensors, as is to be expected. But again, it's never bad, it's never unusable. Just means, again, as with every other CCD camera, there's going to be a little more deliberateness in how you shoot your scenes. Now, on a related note with regards to dynamic range, Pentax had a point of saying that this camera, the K10D, had 22-bit ADCs per color, which is quite crazy since a lot of cameras now have 14 or 16-bit ADCs. However, I think this is kind of mostly negated by the fact that the camera packages the output of that 22-bit ADC into 12-bit per channel RAWs anyways. So how much benefit are you actually getting? Probably not that much. I don't know. It seems kind of weird. However, irrespective of what magic Pentax trickery it is, the files in general on the K10D I find to be very nice to play with. Now, autofocus is where things get dicey. Although I think this may just be my copy, I find mine to be relatively inconsistent with focusing. Sometimes it would hit things spot on really perfectly, and sometimes it, like in a scenario which didn't seem very complicated, it would just back focus. I didn't feel that this is a normal thing for the camera to do, and I think it might just be my K10D, which is kind of weird. That being said, if yours does this too, let me know. Maybe this is just normal for this camera. I don't know. This is the first and only one I've ever had, so I'm not sure. But either way, I actually ended up opening up this camera and directly played around with the correction screws on the base of the camera there to try to make this problem a little less awful, because it did seem like it was back focusing more than hitting. So I kind of thought maybe the hits that I did get were kind of accidental proper focusing. That being said, just an FYI, if you are interested in one of these cameras, the Pentax K10D, if you have the firmware that is like 1.31, you cannot roll back firmwares, I believe, and the older firmwares have a very useful function, and that is actually autofocus micro adjustments. It was removed in the newest firmware, and it was kind of only a debug mode thing for older firmwares anyway, so it doesn't seem to be a feature that they intended for people to use, but it does seem like if I had it, it would have been pretty useful, and it would have been better than me opening up this camera and diddling with screws on, on the AF module or the sensor plane. Anyways, one of those. Yeah, would have appreciated a software fix. But I didn't have the option. Mine is on the newest firmware, so I got what I got. Now, due to this problem of a relatively inconsistent focusing, I didn't even bother trying to track any moving subjects. Since the static subject focusing just seemed to be so erratic, didn't think it'd be worth my effort of trying to get 100% out of focus images. But if it did work, then this camera could do 3 FPS for 9 shots, and it would sound something like this. Not bad. Now, not the fastest camera on the block, average for the time of release, but that raw depth is kind of manageable. A whole 3 seconds of shooting, And in theory, again, if the system of autofocuses would have focused better, it has a 9-point cross-type system, which on paper should be able to, track reasonably well. And I think at the time would have been a pretty reasonable system. Recommendation. First, we're going to talk about price. The average going rate for these is about in line with what you'd see with the D200. So not an expensive camera by any means. And it seems like the cost of these is between 70 to 100 USD with the body only, tested, working. So generally, I would recommend the K10D, especially if you're a Pentax fan with a lot of manual lenses. You can apply them to this camera and things will meter just fine. Also, by the way, this is the first Pentax camera that I reviewed on the channel. I'm now officially in the Pentax club, maybe. I don't know. Let me know for you Pentax peoples. Am I in the club? Am I not? Do I need to buy another one? Also got a K3, so I got more Pentax cameras. Anyways, back to what I was talking about with the recommendation. Overall, it's a solid camera to have, and I would recommend it for anyone that has joy for the CCDs and also has a library of Pentax K-mount lenses, as these systems still mount older Pentax lenses from very, very long ago, and I find that quite good. Now, the camera is also easy to recommend because it has a lot of things that I think are niceties that we kind of take for granted in the modern times. The weather sealing, the IBIS, sensor shake, dust removal. Those are things not to be overlooked. And it's hard to think of a camera that had like all of those things all together in one camera body. I can think of cameras that had one or two of them, but not all three. Sony had sensor stability, had sensor shake, but weather sealing it did not have. Olympus had sensor shake, but didn't have the sensor stabe in some of them. Either way, this is a good package of modernists. Now, that being said, you don't buy the K10D just for the niceties. You're probably buying it for the CCD sensor, and this one, I think, gives that signature CCD look in spades. So, overall, excellent camera, good price, and honestly, just overall something nice to have. To wrap this up, the K10D has honestly been a surprise for me. Again, it's not my first Pentax DSLR or SLR. I have been a fan of their older SLRs, your Spotmatics and whatnot. And I still got quite a few Pentax film cameras as well. But at the time of writing, I also have the K5 and the K3. K3 I just got. But with the K5, I have had it for maybe 7 months, and I've just never really clicked with it. It wasn't a camera that I immediately enjoyed, where when I first got the K10D, I actually wasn't super thrilled with the camera. I really wanted the lenses to just see if maybe they would help me with my enjoyment of the K5, but when I started shooting the K10D, it was like instantly I enjoyed using it. I liked the images coming out of it, aside from the bad focusing problem that this one seems to have. I was relatively taken in by the K10D. Maybe I'm just an odd person though, but what do you think of the K10D? Do you have one? Have you had one? Is the autofocus on mine really weird, or is this just the norm? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, bye.